Hello there, I'm Chuck Todd, and welcome to Meet the Press Reports. In this episode, coming to America. They come here by the thousands, fleeing their homes, their possessions, and yes, even their families, with the hopes of a better life. And when those refugees arrive at this border, they often face a similar nightmare that they sacrifice so much to escape. The group Human Rights First has tracked at least 492 attacks and kidnappings suffered by asylum seekers turned away or stranded in Mexico since President Biden took office. And while we have all now become familiar with images like this, especially in recent years, these images have also sadly become part of the fabric of this country. In the 19th century, it was Irish immigrants who fled a devastating potato famine who faced the scorn of Americans. They were told Irish need not apply for jobs, and they were depicted as subhuman in this cartoon by Thomas Nast. He's the so-called father of the American cartoon. By the way, all of this chronicled very well when any of you can go visit the museum at Ellis Island. A century later, it was Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany on board the German ship the St. Louis who were turned away and forced to return to Europe. More than a quarter of the nearly 1,000 passengers on board the St. Louis would end up dying in the Holocaust. In the 1990s, it was Haitian refugees barred from entering the country, with the George H.W. Bush and Clinton administrations authorizing their indefinite detention at Guantanamo Bay. And even more recently, the ACLU found that after 9/11, the U.S. government unfairly deported thousands of immigrants after the September 11th attacks, simply because they were from Muslim countries and were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so the current crisis unfolding at our southern border right now is just another reminder of an uncomfortable truth about America. We are a country founded by immigrants, but also a country with a history of demonizing immigrants. NBC News' Jacob Soboroff has been reporting on the border crisis and family separations for years. As you'll see, his story begins in 2017. He takes a look at the current crisis and whether people coming here seeking asylum should be heartened by promises made by President Biden, or if they may not get the help some thought a new administration might offer them.
Here at this church in South El Monte, California, every night at 7 p.m. there's a Catholic Mass, but tonight they're doing something a little bit different. So, Lucy, this is you?
Yes, it is.
In March of 2017, I met Lucy Boutte, who worked for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Part of her job was training parishioners how not to get deported by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE.
And so my Spanish is not very good, but I think the translation here is prepare your family for an encounter with immigration.
Correct.
So that's what's happening here tonight.
That's what's happening here tonight.
Lucy was at this church to supervise a skit acted out by parishioners, teaching them how to respond when confronted by ICE in their homes.
Open the door. This is ICE.
How many people are at risk of an encounter with ICE?
Anybody that looks like this is at risk.
That's a lot of people in Los Angeles.
Tell me about it, yes.
The Archdiocese began this outreach in response to Donald Trump's harsh rhetoric on immigration.
Tell me the how. Are you going to have a massive deportation force?
You're going to have a deportation force, and you're going to do it humanely.
After the skit, I met Anna, a U.S. citizen like her 3 younger sisters, who was there because their parents were undocumented.
You're 13. Why'd you show up here?
It's difficult to picture a life without your life. You know, my mom and dad have always been here for me, and they're literally the world to me, and I wouldn't like to imagine a world without them.
You came here tonight to learn what?
To learn what happens when someone gets deported and how to hide or talk your way out of it, you know.
You guys go to school here?
Yeah.
Right here.
3 days after meeting Anna, she invited me back to their neighborhood to meet her undocumented mom and U.S. citizen sisters. In a county with over 1 million undocumented people, one of the things driving fear were rumors of roadside checkpoints run by ICE.
The checkpoint is like 2 street lights from here.
Up that way.
Yeah.
And so what does that do? Like, how do people feel? What are people saying?
We don't come out. That's why we're kind of, you know, in our shells.
You stay home.
Yeah. Stay home.
This month, April of 2021, I went back to visit Anna and her mom and to see how their family's doing 4 years later.
Oh my God. These are your graduation photo?
Yeah.
With a new president.
Last time, I guess, I was with you was 4 years and a month ago.
4 years and a month ago.
And you were 13?
I was 13 in 8th grade.
In 8th grade?
Yeah.
And you had braces?
And I had braces, and I was like 5'2", I don't know.
It was a crazy time because you were 13, and I think Donald Trump had just become the president.
Oh, yeah. 8th grade.
You said, oh boy.
Yeah.
What do you remember about it?
Recuerdo que en ese tiempo había mucha expectativa.
Yeah, there was a lot of tension. We remember that there was a lot of tension on the streets, like not really anybody wanted to be outside. She feels comfortable now with our new president, and they feel more secure growing us up in this environment.
Do you feel safer today than you did back then when I first met you guys?
¿Te sientes más?
Definitivamente sí.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Anna's mom is less fearful than during Donald Trump's presidency, but between the pandemic and the economic impact of lockdown, the past year has been hard for their family.
We don't get the economic help most people do during these times.
Because you don't have status, you're undocumented.
Yeah.
And so you can't get help from the federal government, no money like everybody else is getting. You weren't able to get a lot of the benefits that everybody else got. Even though you're a hardworking family, you got American kids, it wasn't an easy year.
Not at all. We just kept on working like usual. Life has been the same. We're just struggling right now.
It's been hard for everybody. It sounds like it's been extra hard for you guys.
Emotionally, economically. Thankfully, our family's like still intact, even closer together.
This year began with a lot of hope for Anna's family after President Biden, on the first day of his presidency, vowed to support a pathway to citizenship for America's 11 million undocumented residents.
Order I'm signing is restoring the faith in our legal immigration system and strengthening immigration and inclusion efforts for new Americans.
But then came the political controversy over a record increase in unaccompanied minors seeking asylum at the border. In part a seasonal trend, in part a response to perceived changes in U.S. policy. Immediately after President Biden took office, Republicans blamed the president.
And it is the direct consequence of policy decisions by the Biden administration to stop building the wall, to return to catch and release, and to end the stay in Mexico policy.
Are you worried that what's happening there, which is so different from the situation that you're in, that it might affect your chance at citizenship?
We think that now maybe it will affect her chances of getting citizenship because Biden is going to be probably focusing on the problems at the border instead of focusing on those who have been here situated for a long time inside of the United States.
Anna's parents, like most of the 11 million undocumented U.S. residents, entered the country by evading detection. Now most people who arrive at the border attempt to enter differently. They actually want to turn themselves in so they can declare asylum. But often the forces driving them are the same: economic ruin. For years, hunger and poverty caused by climate extremes has been intensifying, driving Central Americans to the U.S. In 2019, the World Food Program took us to a village in remote Guatemala where they were feeding school kids whose parents could no longer grow their cash crops nor buy supplementary nutrition.
So every one of these kids that's raising their hand right now knows somebody who's left to go to the United States because they couldn't survive here. Who do you know that went to the United States?
Mi papá.
Papa. What's he doing there now?
En el hospital, limpieza.
Cleaning. He's cleaning. So her dad's in the U.S. cleaning. Do you want to go there or do you want to stay here?
¿Te quisieras ir con él o mejor aquí, con tu mamá?
Aquí. She wants to stay.
Now, the World Food Program says conditions are worsening.
This was a watermelon.
Complicating President Biden's immigration agenda.
And now you think the current controversy might distract from helping people who have lived here for years, if not decades, just like you.
Yeah, it might affect.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From their house, Anna and her mom and one of her younger sisters walked us to where their dad works.
We're lucky to have him at a walking distance.
Anna's dad, Saul, is an auto mechanic and has been in the U.S. even longer than his wife. Over 30 years. He hasn't been back to Mexico since Anna was born.
We would like to go, but you can't go because
it's across the border.
It's hard.
So if you left, the only way to come back in is to cross the border with a coyote or something like that?
Yeah, with smugglers. They call it smugglers?
Smugglers.
Smugglers.
Yeah.
One thing I don't think a lot of people think about is that what you're describing, Stel, is another kind of family separation. Because if you went home, you would risk being separated from your daughters, maybe the rest of your life.
That's true, you know?
I don't think a lot of people think about immigration reform in this way, but hearing you describe it, if immigration reform passed, it would end another form of potential family separation forever. If you became a citizen, you'd never be faced with the
threat.
Threat?
Not seeing your family again.
It's not just me, it's a lot of people, you know. It's a lot of people that I know that maybe had 20, 15 years that they are working here, you know, like I say, washing my hands, you know.
Yep. These hands have probably fixed a lot of cars.
Yeah.
For all that hard work, for all the cars that you fixed with those hands, you still find yourself in a situation where one day your family could be separated from each other.
Maybe we deserve something, you know, like have good status here, you know.
Because his hands look like that, mine can look like this.
That's amazing.
And Jacob Soboroff joins me now, along with two of our colleagues, NBC News' Julia Ainsley and Cristina Londoño of Telemundo. Jacob, though, I want to start with you. I thought what's so important about your piece is you highlight a family, an Anna's family, that shows you how complicated this issue is. There isn't here we are talking about the current crisis at the border, but we still haven't resolved the issue of Dreamers, which is now, we're on our third decade.
And it's not just Dreamers, you know, it's the 11 million undocumented people living in the country, Chuck, writ large. And I'm so grateful to you all for letting us tell Anna and her family's story because, to say it plainly and briefly, family separation is something we associate with Donald Trump and the cruelty of that policy, the deliberate nature of that policy. But what we have here is a situation, if comprehensive immigration reform doesn't pass, as the Biden administration's put it forward, you will have many undocumented families in this country who are at risk of a different form of family separation, and that's something that Anna and her family live with every single day.
You know, Cristina, I thought what really grabbed me at the end is the fear, frankly, and you heard it in Anna's voice, you heard it in her parents, that the current situation at the southern border is going to essentially give the politicians an excuse to, once again, not deal with the Dreamer population.
That's right, Chuck. But now the Dreamers are getting bolder. They've lived with this fear of their parents getting deported. We saw them in Anna's piece a few years. The whole time she's been worried about them. So now they're saying, okay, pass immigration reform or give us benefits for the Dreamers, the DREAM Act, pass the benefits for TPS holders, and secure the farm workers. We will be the first ones in line, and then we will fight for the other undocumented people. I talked to people at the border. They're telling me that if Dreamers, TPS holders, and also farm workers are put in advance of them, we would have 6 million undocumented people in this country. But they are willing to be the first ones. They say they are tired of being played with, of being political chips. They have felt betrayed both by Republicans and Democrats who bring up the immigration situation right around elections and then forget about them completely. So they're changing their tone, and apparently now the Democrats are also changing their tone from an all or nothing immigration reform, and now they're willing to break it up into little pieces.
You know, I'm curious, you were at the border with then candidate Donald Trump, Cristina, back in 2015. And what did you at all expect to see where we are today with immigration 5 years later?
Well, I didn't expect, no, of course we didn't expect any of that. He did go to the border. He was promising that he would have a massive deportation force, and we still had immigrants coming. That seemed to stop a little bit, and then now we have the Biden administration coming in with a message of hope, and we've had hundreds of thousands coming to the border again, trying to get in again, and now the administration again telling Central Americans that we have a closed border, that this is going to be organized immigration, and that they're not going to be able to come in as they please, and they're not all going to be taken in. We recently spoke to Javier Becerra, the Health and Human Services, and he told us that some of these unaccompanied minors are also going to be sent back. They're not all going to qualify to stay in the United States. So this Biden administration is also changing its tone.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Julia, that's where I want to come to you, which is you've been covering this issue, particularly through the prism of both DHS and HHS. Have things changed now that Team Biden is in charge instead of Team Trump? And if so, what's changed?
Well, in a small way, what has changed is they ended what was known as the Remain in Mexico policy. And they actually do deserve some success there. There were thousands, tens of thousands of immigrants waiting in terrible conditions in northern Mexico because they had been told, yes, you can have an asylum hearing, but you need to wait until the date of that first hearing before you can even come into the United States. And as we know, there were many of those immigrants who would line up waiting for that date, and then they would be told, actually, it's been postponed. And in the meantime, they were kept in terrible conditions where they were often kidnapped, as you pointed out, and held for ransom and really had a very difficult time just surviving. So that has ended, and most of those people have been processed into the United States and are able to stay here while they wait for their hearings. What hasn't ended, though, are still a number of things. They have not reunited a single family that was separated under the Trump administration in 2017 and 2018 through the task force that Biden established. They are still using Title 42, that CDC authority that keeps single adults and families out of the United States, although they are allowing unaccompanied children in. They have not started the process of starting to allow Central American minors who have parents in the United States to apply for asylum there. And then, as we know, looking past the border but more globally, they have not committed to raising the refugee cap to the number that the president stated he would do on the campaign trail. And lastly, they have not ended family detention in ICE facilities, something that the president said he would end and something that DHS Secretary Mayorkas told Jacob that no family belonged in detention. These are all things that they may do eventually, but it's been, we're past 100 days, and so far, no action on those key pieces.
And Julia, I'm curious, when it comes to our asylum system, how in 2019, we have some evidence that shows that even though more folks applied for asylum from sort of Central and South America than folks from China, the Chinese seem to get asylum at a higher rate than folks from Central and South American countries. It certainly looks like a statistic that says there's a little bit of ethnic cherry picking going on here.
Well, and unfortunately, that's been the case throughout many administrations. You can look at how hard it is, for example, to get into the United States from a country like India versus where if you were coming from a country in Western Europe, where the way that we process visas, the way we process refugees, asylum seekers has often been chosen in some ways that you could call ethnic cherry picking, but also just in a way that is very country specific. So that has continued and will continue. It was something that President Trump wanted to bring to an even greater level, but now that has not happened under this administration. But actually, that even goes back, Chuck, to a really crucial point. We're talking about how much things have changed. We're talking about Dreamers. There was actually a point under the Trump administration where there might have been progress on Dreamers. There was a deal. We can remember when Schumer and Lindsey Graham and all of these people were in the Oval Office with Trump, and they thought they might be able to get a deal on Dreamers in exchange for allowing the president to go forward on his border wall. But it was in that moment that the president said he didn't want people from S-hole countries, obviously using the full word. He didn't want those people in the country, and the deal was off. So just to look back at where we've been in the past 5 years, that was a key moment and brought us to where we are today, where we still don't have those protections for Dreamers.
Jacob, Julia, and Christina, I want to thank you all. And frankly, thank you all for the reporting you've been doing for the last 5 years, let alone for this episode, so thank you. Up next, I'm going to talk to someone who dealt with his share of crises at the border firsthand. It's former DHS Secretary Jeh Johnson. Welcome back. My next guest is very familiar with all of the complex issues we just talked about. It's Jeh Johnson. He's the former Secretary of Homeland Security in the Obama administration, and he joins me now. You know, Jay, before I get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty, when you study immigration in America, and I sort of want to get you to react to sort of the point we made at the top, which is for a nation that likes to talk about that it is, you know, we're a nation of immigrants, we serially treat immigrants poorly, at least when they first want to come here. And that is a consistent history of this country. How do you square that contradiction when talking about the story of America?
It does appear to be a contradiction. And let's not forget my enslaved ancestors who were brought here and you know, discriminated against by virtue of law as part of that wave of immigrants from another land. And as you pointed out at the top of the show, waves of immigrants come here. They're treated on the margins of society and ultimately do win acceptance. It takes a while, but they ultimately do win acceptance. So it is a contradiction. It is a tension, but it's who we are as a nation. And the most recent wave coming from Central America, I like to tell audiences all the time, is simply the latest chapter in a continuing saga that began the moment this nation was born.
You know, it seems as if when you think about the asylum system as it stands now in this country, and you think about the threat, for instance, to me, that the greatest challenge we're going to have with asylum claims in this country may be caused by climate change, right? Look at the migration crisis we're seeing. It's not just in our country. How about the Mediterranean, right? What we're seeing in Europe and their version of this. Many people being driven away from their homeland due to damage from climate change. Do you expect we're going to have to be rewriting our asylum laws as we deal with more and more of this?
That was exactly the thought I had when you showed that statistic that reflected the dichotomy between China and Central America. That wasn't so much cherry picking. That reflects what the asylum laws actually say. The asylum laws, and I'm not going to be able to quote it, basically give one protection because they are being politically oppressed as a result of a group they belong to. During the Obama administration, we were able to interpret that to include victims of domestic violence in Central America, which the Trump administration ended. But the asylum laws don't really fit someone who is fleeing poverty, violence, corruption, and now drought, famine as a result of climate change. So you're correct that we do need to take a hard look about whether or not, consistent with our values, we ought to look at people coming from Central America in a whole different way.
Do you think that, how do we both be humane, right? We're not going to turn away an unaccompanied minor, and at the same time avoid that fact being turned into an efficiency in the market, if you will?
You know, that's the very tension that exists with managing this job. And I did manage this job for 3 years. I looked at it from a macro and a micro approach. I probably went down to the border at least 12 times in 3 years while I was secretary. And each time I went, I would actually spend time talking to the kids and understanding why they took the journey, understanding where they hope to get to. Do they have family here? You know, I would spend time in the holding cells at the Border Patrol holding station. And your first reaction as a father and as a human being is to put your arms around these kids and want to take them home with you. And so it's that level of compassion that I think needs to go into our application of our immigration laws. You asked earlier, what's different between Trump and Biden? I think the Biden people, all of whom I know, start from a very different place. The Trump people started from a place of just sheer callousness. The people in this administration, I know, want to do the right thing by these people who are desperate, they're poor, they're hungry. You know, they are the people reflected on the Statue of Liberty. On the other hand, we do have an obligation to enforce our immigration laws. No one wants an out-of-control border. You ask anybody in any community in Texas on the border, no one wants an out-of-control border on so many levels. So we do have to enforce our immigration laws. We do have to deport people, send people back, but we should do so in a careful, prioritized way. And that's what we tried to do, and I think we did in the Obama administration.
Is there the only solution to this crisis down at the border right now is better investment by the United States in Central and South America?
In the long term, yes. The lesson I learned 3 years in office is we can do things that change enforcement policy here in the United States, which sends sort of an immediate reaction in Central America that causes a downturn in whatever spikes arise. But as long as the underlying conditions exist, the long-term trends revert back. And that's why you need to make that investment, and we can make that difference.
Jay Johnson, always a pleasure to get your expertise and perspective on these issues. So thank you for that. And thank you all for tuning in. That's all we have for Meet the Press Reports this week. Thanks for being here, and tune into our next episode. It's part 2 of this issue. We're going to dive more into the politics of immigration and how the modern Republican Party has evolved on the issue, from welcoming to hostile, from Ronald Reagan and amnesty to Donald Trump and the wall. I'll see you next week here on Peacock and this Sunday on Meet the Press. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.